bridge in the background. It's a gorgeous low tide, and we're just really wishing you all a very, very happy Mother's Day. And I know I have a very important question for those of you tuning on with your computers today. Why is a computer so smart? Because they have a motherboard. Now I promise that will be my only terrible joke for today.
Stina, I know you can't keep that promise. You got more terrible jokes in there.
This is true. But Rachel and I are going to do our best out here to give you some very fun intertidal mother facts. So we're going to see what we can find. Thanks to Carly out there doing our tech from home. And yeah, we'll explore the beach and wish you all, again, a happy Mother's Day. So what can we find, Rachel?
I don't know, but those of you watching from home, if you want to pop in the comments what maybe where you're watching from, that's always fun for us to know. I don't have to go very far. This is a red rock crab here at Titlow Marine Preserve. This is an area that's got quite a bit of wildlife because there is no harvesting or collecting allowed here at this spot. So I don't know if I am very wise in disturbing this red rock crab. Oh no, he's very well wedged in there. I think we're gonna leave him be there. But you can see some of the cool features of this animal. They've got let's see, a couple of antennae right on the top there, right where their eyes are. So this is an animal that can totally bury itself down all the way into the mud with just their eyes and antenna exposed. And they're pretty commonly found during the low tide because they're able to withstand a couple of hours outside without drying up, and they like to be protected and safe. So finding these near rocks is pretty common. What you'll typically see is this sand that the crab is kind of excavating out, which is really, really great. You can kind of see them pushing back to dig and get further underneath that rock, so they're protected. There's quite a few hungry birds out here. We've got some American crows and some gulls. I don't know exactly what kind of gulls. Ornithologists or birders really hate when you just call something a seagull because there's about 13 different species of gulls here in the Salish Sea area, but because I can't see their feet or the details of their beak, I'm gonna just safely say that's a seagull. All right, so we've got
Is there any fun crab mom facts you know?
Oh, there are. I was hoping we could find a mom crab to show it off because this is the time of year that crab moms are kind of doing their motherhood thing. So we'll keep our eyes peeled for that. But yeah, they're one of the most prolific of the intertidal animals. The mother crabs can hold lots and lots of babies, maybe as many as 30,000 or so. Oh, Stina, you found something cool.
Yeah, so this is a little orange sea cucumber. It's related to sea stars, and this one's nice because I'm guessing somebody maybe flipped this rock and didn't put it back, which is why we're seeing it on the outside. But you can look along and there's going to be these 5 rows of suction cup tube feet, just like a sea star would have. One end is going to be a feeding end, and the other, well, you guessed it, the butt. But what might be surprising is that rear end is also the breathing end. I'm sure moms out there can make some pretty silly jokes about the children they take care of based on the facts of a sea cucumber.
I like it. Oh, Howard's saying, what is a gull called when it's in the bay?
I don't know, Howard. What is a gull called? Actually, I know. Is it a bagel?
Oh,
Rachel was
funny.
right. I already broke my promise.
Told you she had more bad jokes in there. Good
Howard.
find on that sea cucumber. So we're almost to the lowest point of the tide, and ooh, this is my favorite. Okay, I say this all the time. One of my favorite algae. There's some really gorgeous iridescent kelp here, and it's hard to tell when it's not in the water, but this shines blue, like kind of like a rainbow. Can you see that iridescence coming through? Really, really gorgeous. Love to see that here. It's a lot of red algae on this beach, but because we've had some very sunny days where the water temperature probably got a little heated, some of that algae has died off. So you can see these white patches are kind of almost, I like to think of them as like ghost algae. It's algae that's died but still hasn't quite decomposed. But the other pieces that remain and hold their color they'll continue to grow and reproduce throughout the spring and summer months. There's a lot of rockweed on this beach.
Yeah.
And the rockweed right now is really young, and the tips here haven't inflated, so they're very thin. Towards the next couple of months or so, this will swell up and maybe be about an inch thick or so. And it's filled with this very aloe vera-like gel.
Yeah, I'm noticing this rock is a good example of all three types of algae we have here in the Sailor Sea. We have some brown, green, and then this little fuzzy stuff is a red algae called Mastocarpus.
Nice.
Red, green, and brown.
Ooh, and here's a weird algae. We get asked this question a lot. What are these little brown blobs? This is called sea cauliflower, and it's hollow, so it kind of floats a little bit as the tide comes in and they're underwater, but it's a really nice find. There's also some great filamentous red algae here. And all of this combined works to provide a lot of habitat as well as food for many animals. So it's always a good thing. Stina and I always get very excited when we see lots of algae in a particular habitat. Oh, Stina found a little something. Oh yeah, look at you, little friend.
An adorable little kelp crab. You can see part of why it's called a kelp crab is it blends in really, really nicely with this rockweed here. These kelp crabs also have very, well, pointy little toes. So not only do they jab into my hand, but they're good at climbing around on this really slippery seaweed here.
Nice.
Their pinchers are really nice because it can, you know, snip away at the kelp. Definitely enjoys eating the kelp, but we have some kelp crabs in our aquarium out at the Scansey house. They love squid. So really, they're gonna eat whatever they can get their little claws on.
Opportunistic. All right, so we're gonna walk along and see what other creatures we can find here at Titlow Beach Park. Remember, if you're just joining us, if you wanna pop in the comments, maybe where you're watching from, we would love to hear that. And I apologize for the pause in narration as I navigate this very slippery and soggy and rocky beach. I'm trying my best not to fall while still giving you a good view of some things. So one thing that I like to do, and a kind of a trick that I learned, is to pay attention to the predators. So in this case, we're looking at these crows because they come down during low tide to feed. This is a good opportunity for them to find some food because this is a very rich environment. There's lots of edible things down here. And sometimes just by watching what the crows and the gulls are feeding on, you can discover animals that you didn't even see. Oh, Stina, you are standing right next to such a cool thing.
So this is Puget Sound's only true plant. This is some eelgrass. And this is our native species, Sostra marina.
Look how thick that is.
Nice thick blade. And I'm noticing right here, this is a perfect example of a flowering part of this grass. So just like grass in your yard, you can kind of see these seeds. So that's how this eelgrass is going to reproduce. They are true plants because they transport nutrients from their rhizomes up through to photosynthesis. I noticed a lot of these blades have this little seaweed on them. That's going to make photosynthesis pretty tricky. So hopefully that's a strong current.
That's a species of red algae that only lives. Ooh, check it out. Yep. Okay, Stina and I saw this at the exact same moment. There is a very crabby crab hanging out
in a moon snail collar.
Oh, hey there. You get a twofer. Oh, and look at you. You've got a missing little leg.
Yeah.
A little pincher regrowth.
Have you been working out on the gym only on your left claw here, buddy?
Nice. This is a red rock crab, the same species we saw earlier, and this one's a male. And you can tell that by that belly flap down there where Stina's fingers are, very carefully trying to avoid the range of the pincher on this. This is a species that's best left not handled unless you really know what you're doing. Stina and I have years and years of practice crab wrangling. But what's really remarkable about these crabs is the ability to regrow a limb if it comes loose. So this one is obviously much smaller than the original large pincher, and so it's going to continue to grow as the animal molts and carries on. Very nice, good find. This is another reason why we recommend not walking through eelgrass beds. One, because they are such delicate habitat, but two, because they hide quite dangerous animals occasionally.
Yeah.
But Stina, I see you found something cool, and we passed one over here. Got a sand collar here.
Evidence of moon snail motherhood.
Yeah, these are the eggs, and within this collar, almost like an Oreo and the weirdest filling imaginable. On the inside, there's a layer of little jelly-like eggs, and there may be 500,000 in each sand collar. So 500,000 babies. For a moon snail, their moms are probably pretty glad that they don't have to take care of 500,000 of them. They are leaving these sand collars on the beach, and they'll break apart over the next couple of weeks and release the babies. So mother moon snails never get to meet their babies.
Although I will say, I'm pretty sure moon snails are hermaphroditic. So,
the ultimate
plot twist there.
Plot twist. Mother's Day and Father's Day celebrations going on here. All right, so we're gonna kind of cut across here and change from some of this rocky cobble habitat to the more sandier areas. And we get a lot kind of different algae growing in this zone. We'll start to get to kelp. We're at about a -3 foot tide today at right around 2 p.m. So we've got pretty much the lowest of the low right here. Again, lots of birds here feeding, finding their lunch. There's really, really a ton. I'm not sure if the camera will pick it up, but there are so many little teeny tiny creatures just zooming in and around this algae. That's a type of plankton called zooplankton or animal plankton. The zoo part of zooplankton is the same root as zoo, which means animal, right? A zoologist studies animals. You go to the zoo to see animals. And then the plankton word is Greek for drifter. So these are what we would call animal drifters. And there's two kinds, really. There are plankton that are plankton for their entire lives, and there are plankton that are only plankton when they're young, kind of in their larval forms, and they'll mature to something bigger. So the edges of this eelgrass are a great place to look. Sorry about the glare. I know there's sun and there's wind and clouds, and it's all making for a very interesting experience. So thanks for hanging in there with us.
I feel like the wind only picks up when we're filming live.
That's true. We can be sitting here waiting to film, and it'll be totally calm. And then as soon as we turn on our microphone, then we get some of that. Oh, here's some great kelp, one of those brown algae. Kelp is the largest of the brown algae, and it's got this great base to it. This is called the holdfast, and this grows usually around a rock. In this case, a couple of little pebbles in there, and then there's this stipe, so the stem portion of this. It looks a lot like a plant stem, but Stina mentioned that plants have tissues that transport nutrients and water across, and kelp does not have that. There's no transport going on. And then we have the blade, beautiful brown blade, and this type of kelp is called sugar rack or saccharine kelp. I've never tasted it, but supposedly there is a similar molecule to that fake sugar saccharin. Finding anything around the outside of this bed, Stina? We are on about the last day of a low tide swing, and so that means the tide's been low every day during the middle of the day since about Thursday. So a lot of the animals that are more vulnerable to drying out have moved into deeper waters. So things like sea stars, or maybe even moon snails and large crabs, they may be able to outrun the tide a little bit. But let's take a walk over here. There is some fresh water that comes down here, so we've got a very estuarian habitat, but technically all of Puget Sound and all of the Salish Sea is an estuary. On the Puget Sound side, we've got about 10,000 rivers and streams that flow into it, which means there's a lot of fresh water mixing with the salt water coming in from the Pacific Ocean. So the animals that live here are able to withstand kind of a wide variety of salinities, which is not very typical for invertebrates. Most invertebrates are what we call osmotic conformers, and they can only be at a certain salinity, otherwise they perish. But ours are pretty tough. Oh, Stina found a loose piece of seagrass. We can look at the structures of it.
I couldn't quite hear what Rachel was talking about, but I know she mentioned eelgrass again. But this little piece that was knocked loose is a great example of those rhizomes, so like the root of a plant, again transporting nutrients, blades doing photosynthesis. So kind of a cool example. These networks will just branch out throughout a whole eelgrass bed, so different little shoots will sprout out from this. So I might try and tuck it in the sand and
replant that.
We'll plant some eelgrass for Mother's Day.
Nice. All right, here's one of my most favorite red algae. So that's the nice thing about algae, is it doesn't hide from us. So we can always find algae to talk about. This is called Turkish towel. Turkey was once famous for having some of the best cotton in the world, and so they would weave it into textiles like towels. So this red algae has got this great bumpy texture, and when it gets really mature, see if I can find a piece to show you, it gets really almost feathery and really thickened and very succulent. It's a really, really cool species. All right, I'm not going to walk across this eelgrass bed, but let's head up the freshwater a little bit. So the algae that lives here has to deal with fresh water during low tide flowing over it, and then as the tide returns, it'll get an influx of salt water, and that'll kind of keep continuing every day, twice a day, forever. Ooh, here's some Turkish towel that has some of that blue sheen that the iridescent algae does. It's thought that that's maybe it's really hard to see. I'm trying to give you some shadow and still see that blue. It's thought that maybe it's a type of kind of sunscreen for the early fronds of algae that are coming out. Stina's oohing about something. That usually means she found something cool.
Ooh. Yeah! Right. So this is a ribbon worm. These are one of the stretchiest worm species. They're in the Nemertine group. It is a worm without segments, so it's very smooth. Probably kind of mesmerizing to watch it really undulate there. I'm curious if it's going to shoot out its proboscis at me.
Yeah, be careful, Stina. They do have jaws that can bite. Really, really cool and strange creature.
Look at that. Oh, that is very fun to watch.
I love it. And you found it right here in this filamentous, kind of very hair-like fine. Oh, is he, Stina? You're gonna get bit.
I think it's pretty tiny, so I'm not too worried. This is the mouth end, and it just shot out a proboscis that was about the length of across my finger, which for a worm like this is pretty surprising. I'm also curious why it shot out of that end and not this end.
That you thought was
yeah.
Just goes to show with worms, you never know which end's the head. It's the trouble with animals without a face.
I'm gonna eat you, rawr. There it goes.
Whoa, crazy. Very cool. All right, we'll let him or her go back to their foraging and hiding in the bed here. We'll tuck him down so he's not quite so obvious for our crows and gulls who are hanging close by us. All right, we're at a great tidal height now.
Very slimy.
Ooh, Stina's got a little mucus hand. All right, we can see lots of evidence of animals too in this area. Quite a bit of clam shells. It's a common thing to see in the intertidal zone. Let's go out here a little bit. The substrate changes again to be more gravelly. And we can see even more. Here's some Turkish towel that's a little bit more mature. You can see the kind of little bits of it that are sticking up. It has this great sound if you can scratch it close to your ear. That's a really, really nice piece.
So we have here looking at kelp.
Yeah, that looks great. So you can always tell saccharine kelp because they have these two rolls of boluses, the little wrinkles, I guess. So here's another hold fast of that kelp there. Now, if we could shrink down and just sort of lift individual blades of algae, and if we had a lens that could capture that, we would see thousands of species through here. They're just really, really tiny, so it makes it a little difficult. But we'll continue walking along. Let's see.
What are you looking at, bro?
Yeah, oftentimes the crows will lead you to something fancy and exciting to look at.
I'm hoping to find, YouTube has this great video of a decorator crab just crawling across the seaweed, and you really wouldn't know it was a crab unless it was moving like it was. I'm sure that's something we can pull up from the archives.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll try to post the link to that in the comments when I get back home this evening, because it's a really great. Oh yeah. So I guess this is kelp mothers.
Kelp mothering, yes, that's important too. 'Cause this is a great habitat, important part of the base of the food web.
How it's thicker in some places. You can really only see it when your hand is there, Stina. There you go. Nice.
So those patches will break off and serve as the reproductive material for this lovely brown algae here.
Ooh, I just watched this crow. A clam squirted up, and immediately the crow flew to right where that siphon exhaled, hoping to find a little clam meal. There's quite a bit of shellfish here, just buried beneath the surface, and part of that is because this is a marine sanctuary, so there is no harvesting here. You can't come clamming. There's no fishing or seaweed harvesting or anything like that, so that protects a lot of this habitat and gives a lot of food to our little crow friend here. Speaking of crows, we saw some pretty great crow mothership happening. Earlier, a bald eagle flew through the area, and one very determined crow decided to chase it off, and so was really harassing and pestering that eagle. And whenever you see that happening, they're not doing that for their health. They're doing that to protect their babies and drive the eagle away from their nests.
For the sake of Mother Earth, happy Mother's Day. We'll be doing some trash pickup along the way.
Always a good thing to do when you're on the beach and you see something that doesn't belong there. Leave the beach cleaner and happier than you found it by removing any traces of human in the area. Ooh, I don't know. I think the glare is too much.
I know. Do you think
No, oh, Stina! Okay, wait. We can show how big it is.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna move away this. Oh my god.
So,
Okay.
this is a huge find. This is an orange ribbon worm, and Stina is trying to stretch. Oh my gosh, you're gonna fall. Stretch to show you. Your hair is in the water. Oh, Stina, we love you.
That's a very long ribbon worm.
It's a very long ribbon
So
worm.
this one definitely, we mentioned when we were looking at that purple one earlier, that this is a very stretchy worm. This, it's so great when animals decide to show that off for
Just
you.
cooperate. Look at how long this thing is.
Yeah, that is cool.
All the way to the end. Wow, what a great find.
Almost looks like, I would think it's almost trash. So if you're ever, like, it kind of looks like the...
Looks like a shoelace
fly
or something.
fishing, that, like...
Oh, yeah.
cracking.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely an animal. So I guess if you're ever in doubt, maybe it's better to leave it than to throw away a creature, because that's not very nice.
Well, you definitely don't want to throw anyone away. Oh, hey, Stina, here's your favorite algae right here, too.
Oh my gosh. All right, this is...
Talk about the weird adaptations.
Yeah, so this is acid kelp, and this is one of my favorite seaweeds to press because it just has all these lovely branching pieces off the mid blade and then off the branches.
So the kelp that we were seeing earlier, the sugar kelp, had only one big large blade attached to it. This one branches, and it's got some really, really interesting adaptations that help it to outcompete some of this other kelp.
Yeah, and that adaptation is the ability to create acid. I've definitely noticed on seaweed collecting missions that I'll keep this separate from my other seaweeds because it will bleach out all my other stuff that I collect. And by holding it in my hand, sometimes I notice
You get a little tingle.
burn a little. So a pretty strong feature there. Definitely helps reduce its predation.
Yeah, so the theory is that the acid that they can produce helps to kind of clear their surrounding area of other seaweeds, so that gives them more space and room to spread. So a lot of other land plants do a similar thing. Corals in coral reef habitats also have some kind of chemical warfare type behaviors that they can use when space is at a premium. So eelgrass beds are one of the most productive habitats on Earth. They sequester quite a bit of carbon dioxide from the surrounding water. So this can be a species that is very important for climate change, for taking out that excess CO2. So we always want there to be great eelgrass beds. This is an excellent and beautiful find here. And who knows what's lurking down in there. There's a lot of creatures. Tina's gonna just carefully find something. You missed it. Yeah, I would imagine there's a ton of crabs and small shrimp and things just hiding in this algae, trying their best not to be found and eaten.
I want to find a spiny lumpsucker.
Oh, Stina, I want to find a spiny lumpsucker too.
Eelgrass is a fabulous habitat for this little golf ball of a fish. It has a specialized suction disc, and it can just stick to the blades of this grass. Of course, they can swim, so if the tide's low,
they're probably out. And this eelgrass bed extends quite a ways out into the distance. Let's see. Those of you who are watching at home, what's maybe a creature that you have discovered on a beach walk before, either this week during this week's low tides or in the past? Go ahead and put a comment in there.
And if you want to add why you think that creature is a good mom,
there you go.
Be entertaining too.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, there's a sad looking crab.
Do you guys have an app that you do like marine biology type stuff on?
All right, so here's another piece of this eelgrass washing up. Got some really, really nice kelp. This is one of the algae that the decorator crabs really like because they can snip off a little branch of it, and they have almost like Velcro-like hooks on their carapace that allows them to kind of stick down and almost Velcro things to them. And then when they molt, when it's time for them to grow and shed their skin, they have to take all of that with them. So they leave their shell behind, and then quite often they'll camp out next to their old shell and just transfer everything over to their new shell as it hardens. Here's one of my really fun algae. This one's succulent seaweed, or red spaghetti. Sea noodles, it gets called. There's lots of common names out there, which is why scientists are very commonly use scientific names so that you can be certain of what you're talking about. This one is a... Huh? Say that again, Stina.
I'm pretty sure Sarcodiotheca gadaushii is this one.
Yeah, just say it with authority and no one will question you. This one is sargassum weed, which is an invasive species, a non-native that comes from Japan. You can see these little tiny balls here are called pneumatocysts. They're filled with air to help this algae float. And there's quite a bit of it here, but you can see there's a lot of our native algae here as well. Ooh, found a piece of
some evidence of a shipworm, which isn't actually a worm at all. It's a species of clam that burrows into wood. I'm curious if you can maybe see any of them.
Sometimes you can. So this is a very common reason why ships would sink before really the invention of like anti-fouling paints and very toxic substances that are applied to wood. The pilings that you can see over there in the distance are all coated with creosote, which is an attempt to sort of retard the growth of encrusting organisms and ward off rot. And early ships would often fall victim to these shipworms or teredo worms, which are not a worm, as Sina mentioned. They're a clam that can dig and likes to be in wood. Their natural food source would be, or their natural habitat would be in like driftwood. But when we put a bunch of ships in the water made of wood, they took those down too.
There's all sorts of little amphipods crawling around in here. They are teeny, teeny, tiny.
Oh, little itty bitty guys. Nice. Yeah, inspecting logs or things like that you find on the beach can often lead you to different animals to discover, which is always kind of fun. Never really know what you're gonna get though. All right, well, I think we're probably about done. So if you're out and about, we'd love to, again, hear your your comments about where you're watching from, but thanks for joining us on this lovely, beautiful Mother's Day. We want to give a special shout out to the moms out there, especially all these, me included, especially all these intertidal moms who are busy right now preparing the next generation of life during this very prolific spring and summer. But dear, there's a fish in my shoe. Hold on. Stina,
I have something cool.
There's a gunnel in my shoe right now. Okay, hold on.
Happy Mother's Day, Rachel.
Happy Mother's Day.
Oh
There's a fish
my gosh.
in my shoe.
This is how we know Rachel's really Snow White.
Yeah, they just come to me. I just call the animals. Okay, we're gonna just.
This is where we don't step, but now we get to
see this beautiful crescent gunnel. So there are lots of living creatures.
I'm gonna flip it.
No, if I can get it to come out of here. Come on over, little fishy friend. Hello. Aren't you beautiful? So this looks like maybe a saddleback gunnel.
Yeah.
You can tell it's a gunnel because it's got those little fins next to its face. A lot of people call these eels, but we don't have true eels here in the Salish Sea. It's too cold here for them. But we do have eel-like fish who are filling that role of a very elongated fish. This is a species that can breathe through their skin, so they're really common intertidally. Not many fish can withstand being left out of the water for a while, but this is one that can. So if you do encounter these on the beach, usually underneath a rock and not typically in your shoe, you should just be really careful when you return that rock to its original position that you don't squish them. And then this is an animal that does not have scales on its body. Instead, they have a slime coating, a mucus coating that helps protect them. So what we advise is that you don't touch this species. You notice I didn't really cup it in my hands. I left it in my shoe. But
I guess we really can't help if it decides to touch you.
Yes,
so,
true.
I'm
just standing there giving my conclusion and then wah!
All right. Well, happy Mother's Day from Harbor WildWatch. And thank you so much for tuning in. Yeah, watch your feet.